Well, thank you. Welcome, everybody. My name is Amy Tatum. I'm with Starboard Consulting and want to welcome you to our EAM to Manage Upgrade Playbook webinar. So we are very excited to be learning more about MAS and what is ahead of all of us on the IBM roadmap to manage.
Okay.
I would ask everybody that's just joining us, if you don't mind, go ahead and mute yourself so that we don't get any background noise and extra feedback on the call. And we are recording this session, so it will be available later for playback if you need that or want to share it with any of your coworkers and friends. So before we get started, a little bit about Starboard. We are an IBM Gold Business Partner and Maximo Implementer.
Yes.
And
So
this year we are celebrating 15 years of doing that.
That one is, let me see.
Amy, we can't hear you.
Seems frozen.
I think she's stuck.
All right, are we still there?
Yep, we couldn't hear you. You seemed to freeze up for a minute.
Yeah, I lost the internet here for just a minute. So the beauty of technology. Anyway, so Starboard's been around for 15 years. We're celebrating this year and have always been really actively involved in the Maximo community, doing various events. I've just come off of the spring conference circuit, so it was really exciting and fun to be back in person with people. So for those of you that I was able to meet up with at the utilities working group or one of the airport groups, it was great to be back, and I encourage everybody to get involved in the Maximo community because it's a great network of support. So with me here today is Steve. Steve, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself and give us a little bit of information about your background and your role there at IBM.
So thank you. My name is Steve Houtman, and I've been with the Maximo product line since 1996. I'm getting old.
Hey, careful now. I'm not that far behind you.
I've done a lot of development work back in the old Centura days, in the Java days. I've managed a number of the areas of the product, the core applications, the core framework, as well as the scheduler add-on early on, at least, as well as Asset Health Insights and some other things in between. Currently, I've taken on a technical lead role, helping to get people familiarized with the new technology. Oddly enough, that's something I also did when we went from 4 to 5 and moved from Centura to Java. So something I'm somewhat familiar with. But this one, I will say, has been an easier change in architecture. I know a lot of people on the call are going, "What?" But it actually, it's a lot less changes than people I think realize. So yeah, I'm here to help.
Good. And we appreciate that. And I think one of our goals for today is to help people understand what those changes are and take some of the fear away from what that upgrade is going to look like. So you and I met just about a year ago for another MAS conversation. And on that one, we talked about, what's the same, what's changed, and what's new. So if anybody wants to go back and revisit that particular webinar, there's a link to it on the bottom of the slide, or you can always just go to the Starboard YouTube channel, and all of our presentations and webinars that we've done over the last few years are posted and available there. So with today, though, we're going to focus mainly on the technology. So this is the Maximo upgrade, and that statement right there at the top that says largest technology shift in 20 years, I think is what scares most of us about, oh my goodness, what are we getting into? And for those of us that have been around long enough to remember Maximo 5.2, comparing it to that even by itself is a little bit scary. That was, as you said, the first venture from the client servers into the web architected, and that was a bit of a rough transition. So let's talk about the transition from 7.6 to 8 and that technology shift, and how it's different and easier than maybe what we had before.
Yeah, so the diagram on the left, everybody should be familiar with here, right? This is how we deploy Maximo today. You got your Passport Advantage, and you download whatever you need to your workstation, and then you build your EAR files, you deploy your JVMs, and it's all running under Websphere or Websphere ND, I should say, or WebLogic. And then, you know, you're talking to your database, you're talking to all the other bits and pieces and integrations and stuff like that. And we all kind of familiar with that and comfortable with that. In the new world of, let's say, OCP, really the blue boxes on the left and the blue boxes, the dark blue boxes, I should say, on the left, and the dark blue boxes on the right, they're the same. They're literally the same. They're just Maximo JVMs running. We call them server bundles. They run in what we call a pod. But for all intent and purposes, they are the same. It's made up of the same code. No, we don't have WasND. No, we don't have WebLogic, but it's Liberty. It's the baby brother of WasND. It doesn't do the clustering. That's what OCP does, right? It's just serving up the application, nothing fancy going on there. But other than that, it's basically the same, right? Underneath that, we have Red Hat and OpenShift, which has got all of its, obviously, its bits and pieces that run along with it, Kubernetes and the like that's listed there. But this is all there for purposes of automating the processes and keeping things, basically keeping the lights on, right? So that if things go down, they're automatic brought up. Nobody has to think about it and that kind of thing. It's one of the beauties of going to OpenShift. But I think it's important to realize, unlike that 4 to 5 move, everything inside there from a managed EAM standpoint is the same. In fact, I'll give you a little secret for those that don't know. When we make a code change here in IBM world and we check it into our 7613 project as we work to build 7613, it automatically appears in 8 because it's exactly the same code base, right? There's some checks and balances and that kind of thing. And of course, on top of OpenShift and sort of to the side is the addition of MAS, right? The application suite. Sometimes people will they'll interchange using OpenShift and MAS is the same thing, but they're not. MAS is its own world, right? It's this glue that holds EAM together with the other applications in the suite, right? Assist and safety and predict and monitor and the like, right? And it's controlling those from a centralized place. So one thing, those of you that have looked into this and known to be there, is the user change, right? The users are now in the application suite, not directly in manage, although the authorization, the security groups, that kind of thing, is still handled within manage for the manage authorizations, right? So MAS just is that code that sits around and it's processing authentication and licensing and the movement between apps and all that kind of stuff. And then there's OpenShift that's sitting underneath all of it and driving and running the system and keeping it alive. So, Amy, do you have any questions?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the big question that's on everybody's mind really is how do we get from A to B? So we've looked a lot and done an install and got a MAS or a manage environment up and running as a demo environment, but you know, a lot of clients have been on Maximo for a long time, and it doesn't look like it's all that simple to go from 7.6 to manage. But yet, because it is the same, there's a lot of it that is a pretty easy transition. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, how do we get from where we are today on 7.612, and do we have to start from 7.612 to manage 8?
Right. So yes, you need to be at 7.612, or we also support 7.6.0.10, right? Okay. So you can go right there without going through the 7.6.1 series of things. And you know, it's more of a capability to support than a technological problem for those on the call. because as I'm going to explain, most of the upgrade process is just running through update DB, right? So it's a matter of going through all those scripts that haven't been ran yet. But testing every possible variation from where every possible client could come from it's a little daunting. It's more daunting than the upgrade itself. And so, we've kind of put an artificial, I'd say, limitation on that. But that's why there's that limitation there. So maybe a good thing to do here, Amy, is maybe we should bring up the playbook, right? This is something, we didn't have in the past, and I think would be quite useful for people to use. We spent a lot of time on it. We update it regularly. We've been updating it from each release. We go back in because we're constantly evolving, either because there are pieces that we're still working on that just need to be there, although those are less now than they were before, but there's still some few, or we've gotten some feedback from people and said, well, we need this, or we need that, or can't you make it do this? And so we've kept, constantly been updating this document. I found a few little things missing on Monday when I was reviewing for this, and we've since updated the document to make sure that they're in place. And so, Amy, I don't know, can you bring up a browser?
Yeah.
Share the browser. And everybody at home can try this at home. This is available to everybody. I'm still seeing the PowerPoint though.
Do you see the browser now?
Here we go.
Okay.
There we go. So,
and I gotta throw in there, you can see my search history. Let's go Bolts.
Apparently,
let's go Rangers.
So if you do a quick Google search for EAM, Manage, Upgrade, and Playbook, you'll see that one of the first things that should come up that's not an ad is our Playbook. Oh, actually the first thing. Look at that.
That's the first thing.
So fairly simple to find, right? And it's just a nice little document because you can scroll through it, you can search for things. If you go down to the deployment model, Amy.
Am I looking?
So as we're talking about setup here, why don't we take a look at the deployment model, right? And this is an example of how you might configure your system, right? You can have a separate OpenShift cluster for each instance of, MAS, or translated to each of your different environments, set, test, and dev, and staging, and production. But this is an example. You could have just one OpenShift cluster environment and have 4 versions of MAS running. One, well, this picture shows 3, but we have dev and test together on that first item, right? But you could have each of them it's their own MAS, but running in the same OpenShift cluster. Or some people have said, well, on production will be one OpenShift cluster, and everything else will go into its OpenShift cluster. So this was just meant as a guideline. I know people look at the whole OpenShift stuff and say, well, I've just got my little small EAM system. So this is one of the things you'll see coming in here soon, as we've been working with the Red Hat team on something that's a little more lightweight for purposes of running. It's still OpenShift, but it's something that if you people want to Google, it's called single node OpenShift, which is exactly what it sounds like. So instead of the typical 3 master, 3 worker nodes that might make up a cluster, the single node OpenShift is just a single node, right? And you would run the stack in there. This would not be with somebody necessarily that's running every single piece of the application stack, right? All those things listed in there of monitor and manage and so forth, or someone that's running with 20, 30,000 users and they've got God knows how many UI JVMs running and so on and so forth, right? This is more for the smaller systems, as well as getting us closer to what might be a better working development environment, because that's another thing that we all know and love, that everybody likes to develop things for Maximo, for Manage, and would like to have it running on their laptop. So there's a few things that we're looking at in that area, and you can wait for those to come out hopefully soon. We started down that path just recently, and now that we've got this single node thing kind of flying on its own, and hope to get something published later on this year, or maybe in a few months, we'll see. So that's that little bit. Just wanted to get people there. If you go up to the top, Amy, and do a little search, why don't you search for customization? Because I know people always ask, well, what about customization? Okay. If you look for customization there, and then if you want to select upgrade execution, why don't we take a look at that?
There's two of them
Yeah,
here.
yeah. Well, let's stop at the upgrade. Why don't you go to the first one there? Right. Yeah. So this will walk you through the typical, how do I set myself up and configure the suite and the like, right, for preparation, right? Because again, it's sort of like I got to have Websphere running before I can deploy Maximo into Websphere. Well, you've got to get OpenShift and eventually the suite up and running before you can deploy manage. And so this will take you through a bunch of those steps, right? So this is configuring the system, and you can step through like Amy's doing, and it should take you through most of the steps that you've needed. Where there's a bigger, broader requirement, we've given some documentation, some links. If you can click on the customization stuff, we've actually supplied some samples. The customization page, I think, takes you farther down in this document. I can't recall if it takes you to a whole nother document. Oops, oh boy. So if you go to customization archive, let's click on that one. We talk a lot about the customization archive, and it basically is just you take your customizations, your Java work, right? Java, maybe some XML changes, that kind of thing. Not presentation XML, more like server XML. And you will just create basically a zip file of what that is, all that stuff in the standard Maximo structure. And you're going to just tell the deployment where that is. And what we have here is basically an example. We went through and created this a silly example that had added a field to the asset table. We created our own little field class to put onto that field. We put it on the UI. So it's got presentation changes. It's got database changes. It's got a custom class file that goes with that. We also created a little servlet, a little hello world type of a process, right? So Amy, if you'll go back, all right, so we have this customization archive. And then I believe if you scroll up, I think it's up, not too far up though. It should just be just above. There should be a little area where we typed in our, yep, this is going to go down, SMTP, authentication. Okay, deploying, configuring, manage, right? So down in here, you can see where we use our configuration. I think there should be a screenshot in there. Scroll down some more. Yeah, keep going. Okay, so we're setting up our database connections. We're setting up languages, so it's like whatever languages you'll need. And then next one, I believe, is going to be the server bundle. So this is what we talked about, that you could just specify how many UI servers, how many MIA, how many cron. One thing that will be coming to this page when 8.8 comes out is there'll be a Liberty server. Actually, I don't remember if we called it Liberty or JMS server bundle. So you could use your JMS queues and get those set up using the Liberty version of, well, you might have used as the SI bus in LostND. So that's coming soon. Right now, you can do that manually through some changes, but the UI is coming out in the next release. And you could set up that
like
with a
where
bunch
we
of
get back to the customization archive.
Yep. All right. Fine. Okay. Finally. And then, yeah, so as you can see that you're just going to type in a file name, HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, FTTPS, whatever is proper for your instance. And you specify your zip file. And what we'll do is when you click that big blue activate button in the top right, we're gonna build your ear. We're gonna deploy it into the pods. And we'll create as many pods as you needed based on how you created your server bundle setup, and have that all up and running with your customizations included. So a whole lot neater, a whole lot cleaner than it was in the past, right?
So one question on the playbook. I know we've often in our implementations created our own playbooks. done screenshots and step-by-step instructions of client installations and upgrades and things like that. That's one of our standard deliverables usually. So having this playbook is a great start and would save us a lot of time, other than, you know, all of these URLs are going to be specific to or generic to the playbook. So is this a downloadable document where we could then edit it and kind of mark up where different settings need to be changed to fit a specific client install, or one of the folks on the line here could do that if they're doing their own install to keep track of the settings that they pick for their different environments?
You know, I don't know. I go two ways. One half of me says, well, why not? And I made a
Well,
note.
if it's
I
not,
can
it
find
should
out.
be, right?
What's that?
I said, if it's not, it should be, right?
Well, yeah. Well, I was almost going to go immediately to yes. The only downside would be, like I said, we update this rather regularly.
Yeah.
So you would have to maybe do that a few times as we get our updates, right? It's not Maximo, and it doesn't have an MXS file to merge or changes in.
Right.
I'll look into that. I'll take that as an action item to take a look at to see if it's going to be expanded and configured, customized, if you will.
Okay.
I did make a note. Now another thing
Is
you can
there
do.
anything else in here you wanted to point out?
No, I think people get a good feel. They're drinking out of the fire hose as it is to some extent, I think.
Yeah.
If
I
you
would
scroll down
definitely encourage folks to just go to this and kind of poke around in it. I know I have, and several of the folks on our team have as well. And it's, I won't call it an interesting read, but it is an educational read for sure.
Yeah, I think we've captured most things. And if you scroll, we've been scrolling down. If you select the security and user management there on the left, right, we go into some discussion about that part, because that's something that people ask about a lot. Like, well, I heard about there's this user change, but what is that really, right? And can I still use LDAP? And what about SAML? And you know, how do I get my EAM users into mass and stuff, right? So this is another living area for sure, that this changes regularly. But for the good, right? It doesn't it's not like it worked this way once and it works its other way later. It's more like we keep adding additional features and requirements to it to make it better and better and more usable. So yes, so LDAP and SAML are both supported. If you're connecting LDAP to your EAM system now, basically you got to point that fire hose at mass, right, and have it flow into mass and into its user repository. And then there's a synchronization process that happens that as users are added to mass, they are immediate. Well, I think it's a cron. I think it's every minute that they're added to the managed system. It's a little bit for LDAP. It's going to be a bit of pretty much seamless. For manual entry, you know, it'll wait till you say that they have access to manage as opposed to just monitor, or maybe they have monitor manage, whatever. But it's going to be adding those. It'll push those users out. And there is the concept of group sync. So if you've got groups in LDAP, then you want them to flow through into EAM, and the memberships to flow into EAM. You know, all that is in place so that you can still do that. You see that the second sort of paragraph thing, the all headless interaction side piece. You know, that's one change where the APIs now require an API key and not a username password to connect. Unless you're doing UI stuff, but if it's machine to machine or that kind of a process, then it's going to need an API key. The API key is generated from within Manage. It's also available in 7612 through the admin work center, so you can play with that ahead of time before you even go down this too far with this.
We've deployed that in several integrations, and it works really well. It's a nice addition. So,
Can you say that again?
like I said, we've deployed the API keys with a couple of 7.6 implementations as well, and it's definitely a nice addition to the interface capabilities.
Yeah, I think people kind of like that. But now it's mandatory to come through that way as we lock down, because again, the security check needs to go against mass and not monitor, not manage rather, and so having the API key helps that go a long way. One thing I did want to mention, I know we're coming up a little bit on time here, is that I want to talk about your EAM users. So when you upgrade, when you connect your database to that deployment screen and you point it at your production system or your copy of your production system early on, or a Max demo database for that matter, all the users, all the active users in EAM will be generated in mass, right? So they will be created as mass users with entitlement to manage, just like they are, just like you had them today, just as if you had done them all manually. They all will come. However, we will not be taking their passwords. They all will get generated passwords, new passwords generated. Again, in that configuration, we talk about setting up SMTP. So there'll be an email sent to each of those users with their new password, which they can go ahead and reset, change, do whatever they need to do to get that way. When you install OpenShift, oh boy, I did exactly what I told you not to do. When you install Mass, there'll be an administrator, a Mass administrator created, sort of like the Max admin, but this is Mass admin. That has basically rights to just about everything. And so one of the things you're going to want to do is the Max admin user that got moved from EAM into Mass, you're going to want to go set their password appropriately, and so that you can go continue doing what you do on any other given day. That really covers, I think, a lot of the points I get asked about. I'll just mention one last thing, is at the very bottom of that list on the left, is a set of useful links to the documentation for Manage, links to documentation for Mass, and links to a bunch of other helpful docs so that you can kind of get there from one place. And I hope everybody learned something today.
All right.
So there is one question in the chat, if I could just interrupt a minute. So Spencer asked if, does this mean that Websphere is no longer utilized?
Yes and no. So in the full all-out concept of I'm going to go to the WAS console and see how everything is running, yes, it is gone. We don't have it. It's not there. But there, like I said, there is that remnant we call that is called WAS Liberty, right? And you can have your 7612 running in a Liberty under Liberty and not under WAS ND. By the way, we do have clients that have done that. But but that's the only WAS that's there. That's the only WebSphere that's there. Other than that, OpenShift is now the world for the console, and it comes with monitoring tools and it comes with log analysis tools. And part of the process we're working on, and there are effectively notes out there, tech notes and KC, knowledge-based knowledge center documents that talk about how to connect your EAM into the OpenShift monitoring, so you can get that stuff pouring out, and it even includes how to get some of the MMI output to that same monitor, and so you can see all that information. So yeah, so from a console standpoint, from a where is this thing running and controlled from standpoint, it's OpenShift. It's not WAS. Yeah. It's not WebLogic. Okay. Spencer, I hope that helped.
All right. And we are just a bit over time. There's one other question though about with the replacement of RMI with REST. Can we initiate and route workflow remotely?
Yes.
Sure.
So the latest REST APIs do include a bunch of workflow processing calls. Somebody here internally, which is was quite excited in a way only a developer geek could be excited, because they were putting together one of our newer role-based applications geared around the maintenance manager, and one of the pieces had to do with getting workflow to work. And like, there's this API, it just works. Yeah, that's the way it's supposed to happen. So yes, there is APIs to do REST calls. And while I'm just plugging that, having nothing to do with Mass at all, we have a whole bunch of APIs now available for Migration Manager for anybody that wants to automate that process. So you can look for those as well.
Very good. Well, we're a couple minutes over our time, Steve. So thank you so much for the information. And again, this recording will be available for playback. You saw how to Google and find the upgrade playbook. There's a lot of other documentation out on the IBM sites. So would encourage folks to get familiar with those. I know as far as training goes, Pam has posted quite a few videos on some training elements. And so I think it's just a period of learning for everybody. And we're excited to go down this new venture with IBM as a partner. And if there's anything else that we can answer for you, I know there's a few questions popping in here at the last minute, which we can try to follow up on and get details back out to you all. So thanks for your time today. We hope you've enjoyed it and found the materials useful. And Steve, thank you again for joining me and sharing your wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.